Faye Henderson didn't expect to pass out 30,000 feet above ground, let alone into the lap of a man who looked like he walked out of a magazine ad for luxury watches. Her vision blurred as the flight attendants' voices faded into the background. The cabin tilted, or maybe her body did, because the last thing she saw before everything went black was the concerned face of a stranger sitting across the aisle in first-class tall, dark-haired, blazer unbuttoned, eyes locked on her like he knew something was wrong before she did. And then darkness. When Faye came to, her head was resting against something warm and solid. Someone was saying her name, calm, deep voice, firm but gentle. "Faye, Faye, can you hear me?" She blinked. The plane was still mid-flight. There was a blanket over her and a hand was gripping hers tightly. She turned her head slowly and saw him, the man from before. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled up, and his hand was still holding hers like he had no intention of letting go. What happened?" she whispered. "You fainted." "I caught you," he said, voice low and steady. "You were dehydrated and hadn't eaten. I made them bring juice and crackers. You're okay now." She sat up too fast and groaned. "Oh God, I'm so embarrassed." "You really shouldn't be," he said, offering her the cup of juice. "I was more worried than anything." She took it, her hand trembling slightly. "Thank you, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Brayden Foster," he said. "And you're Faye, right? I heard the flight attendant call you that." She nodded, still dazed. "Yeah." "Faye Henderson?" His gaze lingered on her, and he smiled, not because of amusement, but something softer. "Nice to meet you. I'm glad you're all right." She blinked again, taking him in fully now. He looked expensive. Everything from the sleek watch on his wrist to the perfect tailoring of his navy shirt screamed money. But it was the way he looked at her, so present, so focused, that made her heart feel weirdly offbeat. "I should get back to my seat," she said, brushing her curls out of her face. "You're not moving anywhere until you finish that juice and eat something," Brayden said. "Besides, we've still got 4 hours left. You can stay here." She hesitated. "This is first class and I'm not going anywhere," he cut in. "I told them you're with me now." Faye stared at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied, grabbing a wrapped sandwich from the tray beside him. "Eat, please." She took the sandwich, still trying to piece together how her regular economy seat became this. "I was flying to New York for a job interview," she said after a moment. "I didn't sleep last night, barely ate today. I guess I pushed too hard." Brayden's brows furrowed. "What kind of job?" "I'm a graphic designer." "Well, trying to be. I've been freelancing and working part-time at the library," she admitted. "But this interview, it's a real company, a real salary." "I just have to get through it." He watched her carefully. "You're passionate." "I'm desperate," she said with a dry laugh. "Desperate doesn't get you on a flight to New York with a portfolio and nothing but crackers in your stomach," he said. "That's called guts." For the first time in what felt like weeks, Faye felt something loosen in her chest. She smiled. "Thank you," she murmured. They talked for the next 3 hours. She learned that he ran a private equity firm. Boring stuff, he claimed, brushing it off. She didn't press. He asked questions about her art, her favorite colors to design with, the project she was most proud of. He actually listened. Most people didn't. By the time the wheels touched down at JFK, she almost didn't want to leave his side. As they walked off the plane, he stopped her just before the terminal. "Faye," he said, reaching into his blazer and pulling out a sleek black business card. "If the interview doesn't go the way you hope, call me." She took it, frowning slightly. "Why?" "Because I believe in talent when I see it, and I might know someone who could use a designer like you." She narrowed her eyes. "Wait, are you offering me a job?" He shrugged, but there was something playful in his eyes. "I'm offering you a chance." "Call it a thank you for fainting on me," she laughed. "You're impossible." "You're unforgettable," he said, and the way he looked at her made her feel like maybe he meant it. They parted ways after that. She walked out into the cold New York air with his card in her hand and her heart pounding harder than it had in years. Her interview the next morning was a disaster. Her nerves got the best of her. She spilled coffee on her blouse. The creative director barely looked at her portfolio before telling her they'd keep her in mind. Faye stood outside that building afterward, staring at the business card in her hand. She should have been embarrassed. It felt so far outside of anything she'd ever done. But something about Brayden's voice, the way he saw her like she wasn't invisible, made her dial the number. He picked up on the second ring. "I was hoping you'd call," he said, and just like that, everything started to change. Faye hesitated outside the revolving doors of the towering glass building Brayden had directed her to, her fingers curling tightly around the strap of her bag. The receptionist had already confirmed she was expected upstairs. No last-minute confusion, no gatekeeping. Just a knowing smile and a wave toward the elevator bank. The elevator ride was smooth, silent, and far too fast. Her reflection in the chrome walls betrayed her nerves. Wide eyes, flushed cheeks, jaw set like she was walking into battle. When the doors slid open on the top floor, the scent of fresh orchids and polished wood hit her first. Then the space opened up into a sleek, modern office with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline like a living painting. Brayden stood with his back to her, one hand tucked in his pocket, the other holding a glass of water as he looked out over the city. He turned when the elevator gave its soft chime. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," he said, his tone unreadable. Faye stepped out, her boots making soft sounds against the marble. "I wasn't sure either." He crossed the room slowly. Today, he wore a dark sweater over a crisp white shirt, sleeves pushed up just enough to show the expensive watch on his wrist. But there was no trace of smugness. He moved like someone who didn't need to prove anything. "I set up a meeting with someone I trust," he said. "He runs a creative firm I invested in a few years ago. They've been looking for someone with your style." Faye's brow furrowed. "You haven't even seen my full portfolio." "I've seen enough to know you've got something," he interrupted. "And I trust my instincts." He motioned for her to follow him through a side door into a smaller conference room. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a cobalt blazer was already seated at the end of the table, flipping through a tablet. "Faye, this is Meredith. Meredith, this is the designer I told you about." "Let's see what you've got," Meredith said without looking up. Faye set her bag down and pulled out the portfolio she usually kept hidden behind library checkout counters or coffee shop tables. Her hands didn't shake as she laid it out somehow. The pressure felt different here. Cleaner, less desperate. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes about design choices, color theory, branding consistency. Meredith asked thoughtful questions. Faye answered with a clarity she didn't know she had in her. She even cracked a joke that made Meredith laugh once, a dry little chuckle that felt like a win. When it was over, Meredith looked at Brayden. "She's rough around the edges but sharp. We'll start with a trial project." Faye's breath caught. "Wait, really?" Meredith stood, already tapping something into her phone. "You'll meet the team tomorrow, 9 sharp. Don't be late." And then she was gone, brisk as a wind gust. Brayden walked over, his expression unreadable. "You look like you just ran a marathon." "I feel like I just ran a marathon," Faye exhaled. "You didn't have to do all this." "I didn't do it for you," he said, then paused. "Or maybe I did. I'm still figuring it out." That stopped her cold. "Figuring what out?" He leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed. "Why, I can't stop thinking about you." Faye blinked at him. "We've known each other for a day." "I know. I fainted next to you on a plane." He gave a slight nod. "I remember." She pressed her fingers to her temple. "This is surreal." "I know," he said again, softer this time, "but I don't do things halfway, and something about you, it's not simple." "I don't want to pretend it is." She didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't used to being seen that clearly, that quickly, not without strings attached or expectations waiting like traps. "I should go," she said finally. "I need to prep for tomorrow. I'll have a car take you home. I can take the train." "I know," he said, "but I'd rather you didn't." The ride back to her rental apartment was in a sleek black SUV with heated seats and bottled water she didn't touch. The driver didn't speak unless spoken to. The whole thing felt like stepping into someone else's life. Her phone buzzed just as she stepped inside. "Did you make it back?" Brayden's voice asked when she picked up. "Yeah, good." There was a pause, and then, "Why graphic design?" She sank onto the worn couch, curling one leg beneath her. "Because it's the only time I feel like I'm not wasting air. I can't explain it better than that." "That's enough," he said. "That's more than most people can say." Faye stared at the ceiling. Do you always get involved like this, with people you meet on planes? No, he said. I don't, she swallowed. I don't know what this is, Brayden. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Not yet. There was something in the silence that followed an understanding neither of them could name yet, a thread being pulled taut between two people who hadn't meant to collide but had anyway, and neither of them was backing away. Faye's first week at the design firm was a whirlwind, tight deadlines, a brutally honest creative director, and a team that didn't have time to coddle anyone. But she held her own. She adjusted layouts in real time during meetings, suggested a color shift that landed a client presentation, and even stayed late on Friday to fix a broken animation loop for the brand's social page launch. No one handed her praise, but they didn't ignore her either, and that was enough. She hadn't seen Brayden since the day of the meeting. He hadn't called, not once, and she hadn't reached out either. Part of her told herself she needed to prove she could do this without him. The other part, quieter but sharper, kept checking her phone when she thought no one would notice. It wasn't until Monday evening, when she stepped out of the office after a 12-hour grind, that she saw him again. He leaned against a black car parked at the curb, jacket draped over his arm, tie loosened at his throat. His eyes found her instantly, even with the city crowd pressing between them. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "Waiting for you." Her heart knocked once hard. "You should have called." "I wasn't sure if you'd answer." She crossed her arms, watching him carefully. "Why now?" Brayden stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Because I realized I didn't want to be just the guy who gave you a push. I want more than that." Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't look away. "You disappeared for days. I gave you space," he said. "You needed to stand on your own, and you did. I never wanted you to think that job came with strings." Faye tilted her head. "And now, what's this?" He hesitated, then held up a small black box, not a ring box, but a key fob. "Dinner, uptown. I made a reservation. I figured if you hated it, you could leave after appetizers. You brought a car for that." "I brought a car because I knew you'd be exhausted, and because I missed you." She stared at him for a long moment, then reached out and took the key from his hand. "You're lucky I skipped lunch." The restaurant was not a place she would have ever walked into on her own, with its gold inlaid doors and servers who could have doubled as runway models. But the host greeted Brayden by name and led them to a table on a glass terrace overlooking the river, the lights below shimmering like a field of stars. He ordered for both of them, not presumptuously, but like someone who knew what was good and wanted her to have the best. The table filled with dishes she couldn't pronounce but devoured anyway. Midway through the meal, she set her fork down. "This is insane." "What, the food?" "No, you, this." She gestured to the view, the table, him. "You're not a normal person." Brayden didn't laugh. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I never claimed to be," she swallowed. "Why me?" He didn't blink. "Because when you talk about your work, your eyes do this thing. You lean in like the world's falling away and it's just you and the idea. I've been around people who fake passion." "You don't." She looked away, unsure what to do with the warmth spreading in her chest. "You don't even know me." "I know enough to want to," he said. "The rest I'm willing to learn." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but charged. She reached for her wine glass, holding it between her fingers. "You're not what I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect? Someone who'd already moved on by now, someone who makes a habit of swooping in and then disappearing." "I don't chase people," he said simply. "But I'm not letting you disappear either." Later, as the car hummed back through the city, Faye leaned her head against the window. The lights blurred by in golds and blues, and she felt something shift inside her, something dangerous and exhilarating. When they pulled up outside her apartment, he didn't reach for her hand or her waist. He just watched her with that same unwavering focus he'd had on the plane. She turned to him. "You know this is complicated, right?" "I don't do simple," he said. "Not when it matters." She stepped out of the car and turned back one last time. "Good, because neither do I." He didn't follow her inside. He didn't need to. The next morning, there was a box waiting on her desk wrapped in black paper with a cream ribbon, no note. Inside was a sketchbook. Leather-bound, heavy. The pages were thick, textured, and untouched. On the inside cover, one thing was written in small, neat script: create something only you could. Her fingers trembled slightly as she closed the book. Whatever this was between them, it was only just beginning. And it was already nothing like she'd ever known. Faye stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind lifting strands of her hair as she stared out over Manhattan's skyline. The city pulsed around her lit windows, honking taxis, distant sirens, but above it all, there was a strange kind of stillness. The quiet kind that only existed when something was about to change. Behind her, a soft clink of glassware and the low hum of classical music floated from the rooftop terrace where Brayden had brought her. It wasn't a restaurant. It was the top floor of his building, transformed into an open-air dining space. Lush arrangements of white orchids lined the railing. A private chef plated the final course beneath a string of hanging lanterns that swayed with every gust. She turned as Brayden approached, his jacket gone, his sleeves rolled to his forearms. His expression wasn't guarded like it had been before. It was open, intent. He stopped a step away. "I thought you'd like the view." "I do," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "But why here?" "I wanted you to see the world the way I do, from a place where everything feels possible." Faye studied him. "You're used to getting what you want, aren't you? Only when I know what it is." "And now you do," he nodded once. "Yes," she looked down at her hands. "This isn't just about liking someone, Brayden. You live in a rarefied world. I'm still figuring out how to buy groceries between paychecks." "You think I don't know that? It's not just about money." "I know that too," she lifted her gaze. "Then what is it about?" Brayden's jaw tightened, not with anger but with something deeper. "It's about not letting the best thing I've felt in years walk away because I was too afraid to say what I want." She didn't move. "I want to be there when your designs go live," he continued. "I want to see you walk into rooms and command them because your ideas speak louder than your doubts. I want to wake up and know that you're next to me not just for a few nights, but for good." The wind picked up again, tugging at the linen tablecloths and playing with the flames in the hurricane lanterns. Faye's breath caught. "I'm not used to being someone people fight for." "I don't care what you're used to," he said. "I only care what comes next." She stepped forward, the distance between them disappearing. "What if I lose myself in it?" she asked. "Then I'll help you find your way back." "Every time," her eyes searched his, "you're asking for a lot. I'm offering more." Slowly, she reached up and touched his face. It was the first time she'd let herself. His skin was warm, his eyes locked on hers like he was afraid she'd vanish if he looked away. "I never fainted before that flight," she whispered. "I know," she smiled just a little. "You really caught me." His hands curved around her waist, pulling her gently against him, "and I'm never letting go." The kiss wasn't soft, it wasn't tentative. It was every unspoken word, every nearly crossed line, every moment that had built between them finally breaking through. She kissed him like she meant it because she did. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come with me tomorrow," he said. "There's a gallery opening in Tribeca. I want you to see what your future could look like." She traced a line along his collarbone. "I have a deadline." "I cleared your schedule," she blinked. "You what?" I called Meredith. She agreed. "Told me you deserved one night to celebrate." Faye laughed, stepping back. "You're unbelievable." "I'm invested in me, in everything you are," he said. The next night the gallery was buzzing with collectors and curators, but Faye barely noticed them. She recognized two of the pieces on display, her own work, cleaned up and printed large, added at the last minute. Meredith stood nearby, watching from the shadows with a rare look of approval. Faye turned to Brayden, her voice low. "You didn't tell me." "I wanted to see your face when you realized." Her eyes burned. "You keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Showing me I'm worth more than I ever thought." He leaned in. "Because you are." Later, back at his penthouse, she stood barefoot near the window while he poured 2 glasses of champagne. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," she confessed. He handed her a glass and tapped his against hers. "You belong with me." Her throat tightened. "This isn't temporary, is it?" Brayden shook his head. "Not for me." She set her glass down and walked to him, resting her palms against his chest. "Then don't ever disappear on me again." He wrapped his arms around her, pressing his lips to her hair. "I won't." "I promise." He reached into the inside pocket of his shirt and pulled out a folded envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a contract, not for a job, for a design studio. Hers, backed by his firm, her name on the front, her branding, her terms. She looked up, stunned. "You said you wanted to build something of your own," he said. "So let's build it together." Faye didn't cry, not really, but her eyes glistened as she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him again, harder this time. This wasn't a rescue, it wasn't a fantasy, it was real, earned, and hers. And Brayden, he wasn't just the man who caught her when she fell, he was the man who showed her how to fly. Faye stood barefoot in the warm glow of their new studio, a high-ceilinged loft on the Lower East Side with exposed brick walls, massive windows, and a second-hand espresso machine that hissed more than it brewed. She was covered in paint splatters and sawdust, her curls tied up in a messy knot, and her heart felt fuller than it ever had. Brayden was crouched under a table, screwing in the last leg and muttering to himself about stripped bolts. He looked completely out of place in a t-shirt and jeans, yet somehow more at home than he ever had in a tailored suit. "This is the last time I let you convince me to buy flat-pack furniture," he said, tightening the final screw with a grunt. "You said you wanted to do something with your hands," Faye teased, walking over with 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee. "I meant pottery or something less likely to result in a broken thumb." She handed him the mug. "You only bruised it." He took a sip and winced. "And you made the coffee, didn't you? Be grateful. That was the last of the beans." He stood, stretching his back with a groan before looking around. "It's actually starting to look like a real studio." Faye leaned against the table, surveying the space. "It is a real studio. This is happening." He set the mug down and crossed the room to her. "You're happening, and I'm the lucky bastard who gets to watch it." "Not just watch," she said, tugging gently at the hem of his shirt. "You're in this too." He looked down at her, eyes warming. "I still think you're the bravest person I've ever met. And I still think you overpaid for those light fixtures." Brayden laughed, the sound echoing through the open space. "You're not wrong." The launch of her design brand had gone better than either of them expected. The first client, a boutique hotel undergoing a total rebrand, had already signed on for a full campaign. Meredith called the next day with another referral. It wasn't luck, it was readiness meeting opportunity. And for Faye, it was the first time she felt like her life wasn't just surviving, it was building. That night, they returned to Brayden's penthouse, but it no longer felt like just his. Her sketchbooks were scattered across the coffee table, her favorite slippers were tucked under the couch. Half the closet had slowly morphed into a space for her clothes, and the fridge now included oat milk and frozen waffles. As Faye stepped out of the shower, she found Brayden on the balcony staring out at the city, a velvet box in his hand. Her breath caught. She walked toward him, towel around her shoulders. "Are you seriously proposing to me in a towel?" He turned, startled, then laughed. "I wasn't planning to, I just needed a second." She eyed the box. "That doesn't look like hesitation." He opened it without a word. Inside was a ring rose gold, delicate, with a single oval diamond and a band that split at the sides like an artist's brushstroke. "I wasn't going to do this tonight," he said, voice low and sure. "But I looked at you earlier, standing barefoot in the studio you built with your own hands, and I knew I couldn't wait." Her hands trembled slightly. "Brayden, I'm not asking because I think you need me. I'm asking because I want to build every version of our life with you. I want to argue about lamp choices and make terrible coffee together and kiss you every time you walk into a room. Marry me, Faye." She stared at him, eyes wide, heart thudding so hard it hurt. Then she laughed, quiet and breathless and full of disbelief, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, it was like the city disappeared below them, just him and her, and the promise of everything they hadn't yet lived. 6 months later, they stood in a garden in Italy, surrounded by olive trees and white flowers. The ceremony was small, only 20 guests. A violinist playing under the fading gold of the evening sun, and Faye in a flowing silk dress that caught the light every time she moved. Brayden wore a midnight blue suit, no tie, and a grin that hadn't left his face since she'd walked down the aisle. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Brayden didn't wait. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her like he'd been holding his breath for years. Later, under fairy lights and stars, they danced barefoot in the grass. He held her close as the music slowed, whispering against her ear. "You remember when you told me you didn't belong anywhere?" She nodded against his chest. "You belong with me." "Always." She looked up at him, her eyes full of something that had nothing to do with tears and everything to do with joy. "I know." They spent the first week of their honeymoon in a villa nestled above the Amalfi coast. Faye painted in the mornings, sketching the sea and cliffs from their terrace. In the afternoons, they explored winding towns, sharing gelato and kisses in equal measure. By the time they returned to New York, the studio had picked up momentum. Faye hired her first employee, a recent art school grad who reminded her of herself. Brayden continued to sit on the board but stayed hands-off, letting her lead. They made a life that wasn't perfect but was fully theirs. Some mornings were chaotic and some nights ended with takeout on the floor. But their laughter never faded, and the love only grew louder. And every time Faye saw the ring on her finger, she remembered the girl who boarded a plane with nothing but hope and a portfolio, and the man who caught her when she fell but never once tried to keep her from flying.